Hey gardeners, Taylor here. I hope you had a wonderful, wonderful holiday. I'm recording this in the middle of January and I've finally recovered from all of my social events. I've taken my Christmas decorations down and it has been back to the grind, which also means back to the community garden podcast. So it's been a while since I've been in front of my mic, but I'm really excited to bring you some of the really cool guests that we've had over the last little bit and dive right into the podcast again. Before we get started, I do have a little bit of housekeeping. So for my local folks, these are folks located in or around Brantford, Brant County, Six Nations. We do have a couple of volunteer positions that are now coming up for the 2025 gardening season. So we are looking for garden champions to help spearhead the gardens located at Sunny Hill Park in St. George, Iroquois Park in Brantford, and Scotland Community Centre in Scotland, just outside of town here. Now, we also are always looking for support at all of our community gardens. So if you want to get involved, there is a map of all of the gardens that we support in the area. You can go to www.egcgbrant.ca and you'll be able to see all the gardens we have and register as a volunteer there. Now, if you're interested in taking on a champion position, you can do what I just told you to do. You can also email me at podcast@egcgbrant.ca and I can connect you directly. We also just elected our fabulous new board of directors last week. So welcome our new directors to the team. We're so excited to work with you. That also means that we are looking to fill roles within our committees for the season. We have an events committee, fundraising and grants, really need help with that, as well as a volunteer committee and a few other things. So if you've been wanting to get involved maybe on the back end or you want to help with a special project, again, www.egcgbrant.ca. You can go through the volunteer positions there and register, or you can just email me podcast@egcgbrant.ca. Okay, I think that's it for now. If there's anything else to add, you'll hear me in a second. But again, I hope you had a wonderful holiday. I hope the folks who are in colder areas, you're staying cold as I'm recording, or you're staying warm. As I'm recording this, it's like -18 out, which is not really normal anymore for Southern Ontario. And the office that I'm in recording this is not heated. So I've got a little rad heater beside me. I feel like I have like a little bonfire beside me. I could be like roasting s'mores. But anyways, okay, let's get into it. Hey gardener, you're listening to the Community Garden Podcast. I'm your host, Taylor. In this space, we'll dig into the dirt with local gardeners of all skill levels to share tips, tricks, and stories from our gardening adventures. Let's get growing. Hello, gardeners. We are on our second week back from our little holiday break. And I know I say this every single episode. I'm so excited for this one. We chat with Gillian Aiken, that's how you pronounce it, who is a local beginner gardener here in Brantford. I met Gillian for the first time in February of 2024. We did a Plan Your Garden workshop, which ended up being way more interactive than I intended because we didn't have a projector when I thought we were going to. So it ended up being a very lax group effort. We pushed all our tables together and we got to designing. So it was a really fun, good opportunity to connect with every single person that was there. So Jillian had quickly signed up for our host garden program, which if you would like plant seeds compost, you can access that both in our show notes and on our website. Go to the communitygardenpodcast.ca, you'll find it. You can register for our host garden program and we'll give you those items. So Jillian was a host gardener this year for 2024 and really made do with the space that she has. I won't go into too much detail, but in this episode, it was very much, it felt like listening back to it, it felt like an FAQ. So there was a lot of like questions and then a lot of answering. So we problem solved quite a few things. And I hope Jillian walked away with some good ideas to implement in her garden for next year. So we talked about things like beginner friendly brambles like raspberries and blackberries. We talked about cauliflower problems because that plant seems to be more difficult than it's worth. We talked about navigating sterile soil because Jillian was gardening in a very tricky space, which she talks about. We also talk about tomatoes for beginners. We did a really good deep dive in growing zones. We actually get to cut some of it out. And we also talked about seed saving. So we're going to dive right in. I'm, again, very excited for this one. And it was so great chatting with Jillian. I had so much fun. Okay, let's get into it. Welcome, Jillian. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm so excited to chat with you tonight.
I'm excited to be here, Taylor.
I know it's a little bit later. It's dark out. It gets dark at like 5 right now for folks listening. We're in the middle of January and it feels like 9 p.m. right now. Do you have the same vibe?
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
I'm in like a little dark office and there's like no lights on.
Yeah, we have some sunset now, which is nice. I've been noticing. Some evenings haven't been completely gray, but
Yeah, that's true. We have had a bit more sun. We've had a lot of snow. It's like snowed every day for the past 2 weeks. I feel like we haven't experienced this in a couple of years, so I'm a little bit grateful. But yeah, we've had a little bit more snow too, which has been nice.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right.
I enjoy it.
Yeah.
Last winter was my first winter here, and I didn't know what to do.
Where
I was like, this isn't January. Oh, yeah.
where were
Because we
you?
didn't have that much snow.
Where
Yeah.
were you before?
Montreal for 4 years.
Oh, that's snow.
That's
You got a lot of
snow.
snow, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So coming here, I mean, to be fair, like the last, I don't know, 3 or 4 winters have been disasters. We had snow last year, like maybe twice. And this year we've had consistent snow quite a bit, which, yeah, it makes the winters a little bit more bearable, at least for me. I know I'm not speaking for the whole world, but it's also good for the environment and good for gardens.
Snow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, let's dive in. Could you introduce yourself and maybe go into a little bit of background knowledge on like your gardening experience?
Hi, so I'm Jillian. I moved to Brantford officially in April of 2024, but I had lived here since November 2023. So
Okay.
I've been here for about a year and 2 months or so, and moved from Montreal here. And when I arrived shortly after, I was looking through the bee scene, and that's where I first found out about Equal Ground. And I was like, I want to get involved or just touch base with this community, which is doing like the community garden work, which has been a growing interest of mine in the last few years. So I live in the new developments, which are by Assumption High School, and it was my first time having a yard. So took that as an opportunity to learn about gardening. And then Equal Ground, very happy to find Equal Ground.
Yeah, well, we're welcome to have you. So you were a host gardener this past season, and you've had some trials at the property that you're currently at. For example, I remember when we did our Plan Your Garden workshop last year, I was just doing aerial looks of people's backyards and helping them kind of figure out where gardens could possibly go. And I remember trying to pull yours up, and I was like, this is a field. And I guess the case is it's really a new build, and Google hadn't updated yet. It was still it was like a field on Google Maps. I'm like, where does this person live? And I know you've been struggling a little bit with getting the garden going in. Do you want to kind of launch into what you and your partner have been working on at that space, and at like how long have you been gardening for before living here and after?
Okay. So the property, we got grass about May of 2024. So when you were looking at it, Taylor, it was just barren land, and people will know a new build is it's weed. It does so before they work it, we moved in and it was a lot of just weeds that had been growing left over after, I guess, the land was destroyed for the new build.
Yeah, everything was picked up and sterilized and dropped back down. It's a perfect example on why you don't rototill gardens for that purpose, because then all the weeds come up. Yeah. Yeah, it's a good example for not rototilling. Okay. So when you had moved in...
That's beyond my gardening knowledge.
That's okay. Yeah. That's why we're here.
Okay.
So when you had moved in, there was just weeds, and then they were able to put grass down in May.
Yes. Yeah. And so they by turning the soil, they got rid of kind of the weeds, and then it was just the brown soil, and then the grass went down. And I looked at this. We have a lot of yard. We're grateful to have that. And I thought, well, this can't be barren. That's not very good for the environment. So let's just do something. And I've been wanting to garden. So before this, I had grown on my balcony in Montreal and in Toronto, even earlier than that, basil, cilantro, and cherry tomatoes. That was the extent of it in a few containers.
It's a good combo.
Right? Yeah. And so I learned at the Plan Your Garden workshop in February, there's such thing as combining certain seeds together,
Mhm.
and then to get the seeds and to get the plants from equal ground. That kind of determined what we planted.
Mhm. Yeah, because
And yeah,
you fully planned your garden with us last
yeah,
February. Yes, I remember you being there. Yeah.
yeah,
And we
yeah,
did, I think the term you're looking for is companion planting. So some of the plants that,
yeah,
benefit each other by hanging out beside each other. Yeah.
yeah. And so what when the next time I saw you after that great planning workshop where it was really one-on-one, oh, companion planting is a thing. What type of plants should we grow? Grow what you eat. And so in my household we eat a lot of Indian food and we make it at home. And so I was just a lot of like potatoes came up and a lot of vegetables we didn't end up growing. Anyway, and the next time I saw you, Taylor, was when we were picking up compost. And that was when this was after the grass was down. And in the new build, they put down what's the word for grass pre-grown?
Sod. Yeah, so it was
Sod.
strips of sod that were put in. It wasn't seed. Yeah.
Hmm. And so my partner and I, we just took up the sod. We just rolled it back up. And so we had nice 1.5 rows, and we had 2 rows of that, about 8 feet with the width of sod,
Hmm.
and then with a little path in between. And I was concerned about the nutrients in the soil. I don't know a lot about nutrients, so I go to you, Taylor, and I say like that we have never worked the land before, and you said the compost will work, and so we took the compost provided free from equal ground and just put it on top and kind of mixed it in that soil,
Hmm.
and took the plants you provided as well. And I just took the plants that were available. And I was a bit not too ambitious because we had the space to grow everything.
Hmm.
But the time it took to plant everything took about 5 more hours than we thought. Probably a couple of days more and then we did it
Yes.
in the rain, which might not have been the best idea.
Uh,
But yeah,
Actually, that's not too bad of an idea. Folks
okay.
listening, the best time to plant is when it's overcast. And at least if you're doing it when it's raining, then you don't have to water the plants after. Sometimes when we put plants in the ground when we're in a heat wave and when it's sunny out, we can stress those plants out. So you actually probably did yourself a favor planting them when it was raining.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it felt like moving mud.
Yeah, and that would be because of the soil quality that you had. Like you said, it's pretty much sterile soil. It's been picked up and dropped back down, and there's probably been different machines driving over it, compacting it. So it would be very difficult to kind of pick it up. And we had a discussion about how like the next 2 years it'll probably suck, but if you nurture the soil, it'll come back to you. So I imagine it was like picking up mud. And your comment about it taking 5 hours longer to plant, this is something that most beginner gardeners don't think about and something that I forget about every year. And I usually have to, I mean, I have a very large area that I'm growing, but I usually have to do it over a couple of days because it takes longer than people realize. It definitely
Mm.
does. Yeah. So you
Hmm.
got everything in the ground. It was like moving mud around. And you also had the compost, nice chunky layer of compost on top, which would have helped, I imagine. So, yeah,
Yeah, I
good
think
stuff.
so.
So then how
Yeah.
did the season go? How did things grow?
So things grew. The things that grew were the tomatoes and the marigolds and the sunflowers and the herbs and the hot peppers, spicy peppers.
Nice.
What didn't grow was the cauliflower
Hmm.
and some of the capsicum peppers, the sweet peppers.
Oh,
Yeah. And some of
interesting.
the cabbages. So we had one nice cabbage, one small cabbage that we ate, and then 2 that just rotted.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
didn't. They didn't do well. There could be a
Yeah.
couple of reasons for that. One, the cauliflower, not a beginner plant. I'm not gonna lie to you. I
Mm.
I struggle with it. I don't really know anyone that is successful with cauliflower. Part of that is because we have an aphid problem here, like everybody. So sometimes little gray bugs can kind of take over. Another issue is once the cauliflower actually develops, if it has sunlight on it, it can like brown and rot. So you almost have to actually tie the
Mm.
leaves around it as it grows. So there's a couple of reasons that make cauliflower a little bit more tricky, but my suggestion is to try again. And then same with the cabbage, same pests. They typically like, broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, and kale attract the same type of pests. So if it's going to affect one, it may affect the others. That may have been the issue. Do you remember seeing any little gray bugs on them at all?
No.
No.
And I do wonder if that worked to the advantage because although like there's not a lot of trees in the area, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's not a lot of vegetation.
Yeah.
So I think fewer pests, sadly, it kind of worked
It
out.
can go like one way or the other. It's usually one extreme or
Okay.
the other. In that case, you're in a barren land. And if you do have wildlife or you do have pests, there's very little food source that they're going to be competing over. Now, the flip side of that is if there's no wildlife and no pests, it would take a while for those to be introduced. Sometimes some of that biodiversity, because that's what it is, it will come in on the sod as well. And it'll come eventually. Birds that are flying over are dropping things, and wildlife that are running through are they have pests on their bodies and stuff. But yeah, I think it just depends. You'll probably notice, and you probably already have, you've been living there at least for a year, that the wildlife will come back slowly. But ultimately, that land that was cleared becomes pretty much sterile. There's no food source. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah, frogs and what else? Yeah, the bees do come to the flowers especially. So I wanted to get some flowers in our garden for the first time. I think the cauliflower got that brown on top when we had heat. So it was wet when we planted, end of May, early June. And then I only watered with the runoff containers from the, what are those called again? Rain barrels.
Yeah.
So it just hooked a hose to that, got those set up, and just watered with that. Otherwise, we didn't do much watering.
Yeah.
And so it did get a bit dry, but the tomatoes were still growing. The carrots were in there in the ground doing something. Carrots, so I want to talk to you about carrots too because they were quite short.
Yep.
Which I think is normal. I looked up some YouTube videos about carrots, and I didn't look up YouTube videos about cauliflower. Just left that one to not grow.
Okay, let's touch on the cauliflower because when it started to fruit is when it started to brown. Is that what you mean? Yeah, so that's normal for cauliflower. That's because the sun was on it. If you're going to grow it again, and for folks listening, let's picture a cauliflower plant, a big bushy, almost cabbage-shaped plant, and the leaves kind of shoot up, and then the cabbage starts to grow up in between it. What you can do is collect those leaves that have shot up and actually tie it to make a covering over the cauliflower. Now, sometimes you want to kind of tie it loose so that the cauliflower can keep growing. If you tie it too tight, then the cauliflower has no way to grow. So just loosely tie those leaves over top of the cauliflower so as the cauliflower grows, there's no sun access. And that's how you can keep the cauliflower white and stop it from going brown. So if you're going to do that again next year, give that a try. This is a very common issue for cauliflower.
No sun access for the white part.
Yeah, that's what we always want to try. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The fact that you got that far is pretty impressive. We grew a couple cauliflowers at Earl Haig this year, but they disappear so quick, and they only provide one harvest. That in a community garden setting, unless you have tons of space, that's valuable real estate, right? So
Yeah.
with the
Noticed
carrots, yeah, with the carrots. Now the fact that you got the carrots to germinate are pretty cool. Carrots are actually difficult, and we actually this year this is for anyone listening in Brantford, Brant County, we might have a little carrot growing competition because they can be difficult to germinate, but the fact that you got them to germinate is good. And likely with them being stubby, sometimes it can be the variety. And Eagle Ground has hundreds of varieties of carrots. So if you have something that you want to see when you fill out your plant list this year, write down, what types of carrots you might want. But usually if they grow stubby and they weren't intended to, it just means that the soil was too compact. You want to make sure it's aerated and well draining. Now, not all soil is suitable for growing carrots. So if you have clay soil, if you're in like Haldeman and it's like literally looks like clay and there's no, air pockets or anything throughout it, that's going to be problematic right from the start. You're going to have a hard time growing carrots and something like that. Like you just wouldn't grow it in that type of soil. In that case, you would maybe grow them in a container. If your soil looks nice and rich and it's just maybe really hard because those machines were driving over it, try loosening it up. In my backyard, I have massive rocks because I'm on the river, so I don't grow carrots in the ground because they end up being deformed from trying to grow around the rocks. So I just grow them in pots, and then my dogs eat the carrot tops. I would think it would just depend on what type of soil that you had. If you were successful in growing carrots and they grew. And how big were they? Like this or smaller?
The biggest one was about that big.
Yeah, your
Actually,
soil's probably
maybe a
fine.
bit more.
Yeah,
But then
maybe
everything else, sorry, it was about 5 inches, the largest one, and then the others were a good 3 inches.
we're little. Yeah, maybe try aerating the soil a bit this year. You can also grow carrots in pots. That's not a problem. Sometimes when they're grown too close together, so when we sow our carrot seeds and they germinate, once they get, a couple inches tall, you want to go in and pick out some of them so they're not too close. And if you grow them too close, then they have a hard time too, but in that case they just end up really thin. So
Right.
if you grew
And I
them
did
last
that.
year,
From a YouTube video, I learned that. So I took them
Yeah.
out. I was scared to take them out because
Yeah,
I was
I
like,
know.
what if this is a good one I'm taking out?
Yeah.
And then was I taking out enough?
Mhm.
And I think I could have used more space,
Mhm.
like an inch on either side
Mhm.
or 2 inches, right?
Yeah, that's what I would say. I know I
Okay.
still, even like 5, 6 years in, I still have a hard time thinning because I'm like, oh, the potential, the potential. So yeah, try aerating the soil a little bit. When you fill out your host garden plant request, just make a note that you want some like bigger carrots. Last year at Earl Hag, we grew like little carrots that were round. And everybody was like, look how short they are. I'm like, oh, that's actually the variety.
Wow.
Yeah, so
Neat.
I'm surrounded by seeds right now. Like,
Okay.
I'm just packing them for the library right now, and I'm not kidding when I tell you we have like dozens of varieties of carrots. So just make a note, maybe.
Nice.
Yeah.
And the seeds get given away at the library?
Library, we give them away through the host garden program. I have a huge banana box full that a volunteer is labeling, and then I take those to events with me. So do you remember at the Plan Your Garden event, I just had like a big bag of random seeds?
Yes.
So we give them out there. We give them out to our host gardeners and our community gardeners. And then, yeah, for the seed library, so both Brant County and Brantford, they have seed libraries. You can go in and you can like rent seeds. And the idea is you take them home, you grow them, you collect seeds, and then you bring them back. But the latter half of that doesn't happen very often. So we stock them. And most of our seeds are donated. So they're typically coming from grocery stores or suppliers where they can't sell the seed. Oh, that was me. I'm going to repeat that just so we don't. Oh, I forgot to turn my phone off. The majority of the seed that we receive is donated, and it comes typically from grocery stores or suppliers where they can't sell the seed after the season ends. So honestly, it's going to get thrown out anyway. So it's nice to be able to shuffle that back through programs. So yeah, anyone listening, and seed libraries are very common. So for folks who aren't in Brant County, like likelihood of your library having a seed program is pretty high. So check in with them. So
Nice.
yeah. So you had success with the tomatoes and the peppers. I don't know why you had an issue with the sweet peppers, but you had a good experience with the hot peppers. That's very odd to me. For 2025, what types of garden plans do you have?
So the plans are to use the same space, maybe extend the garden by 3 feet, and grow plants that keep producing throughout the season. It's a lot more rewarding to go out and pick them. Swiss chard we did as well, and that just kept going. It's very healthy. We didn't have recipes for it right away. We ended up frying it with oil and garlic, and the salad, it's not the best for salad, so
it's a little bitter for the salad. Yeah.
But I think like a lettuce that we eat on a regular basis, we do eat spring, the mix of the spring variety from the grocery store in those plastic containers. And so I think if we can get more greens that just keep growing, that maybe not Swiss chard, even though it's so healthy for you, but it's just not our preference.
I love Swiss chard, but sometimes I grow too much and then I feel overwhelmed. I just steam it with a little bit of vinegar, and the vinegar cuts a bit of the bitterness out. But a good mix for you for the lettuce would be like a mezclun mix, which is essentially what they grow for the garden. So we have lots of that. So again, in your request, like you can just write down like you want like a leafy green variety, and we have lots of that. And it just keeps producing. You can just cut it right at the base and it'll just keep growing and growing and growing. So, yeah.
But to get the variety of different greens, then that will be like different plants, right?
Technically, so it's like a seed mix, and they all have the same growing conditions. So when you grow them, it's like different colored lettuces and arugulas and stuff that actually come in within the row. It's really cool to see.
Ooh.
Yeah, we had a lot of that at Earl Hike this year too.
Oh, that's
So
so good.
yeah, there's lots of different lettuce mixes, green mixes, or you can even mix them yourself too. So if you got a bunch of different lettuce varieties, you could throw some spinach in there, some arugula, and you could go in and sow it yourself. And also, like, maybe not in your area, but don't underestimate the value of dandelion leaves, because there's often dandelion leaves in those mixes. Just don't harvest dandelion leaves from an area that's likely experiencing pesticide spray. So just keep that in mind.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I harvest dandelion leaves that grow up in my garden, like in the lawn that isn't sprayed with pesticides?
Absolutely. Yep.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
all edible. All parts of the dandelion are actually edible, including the leaves, the flowers, the stems, and the roots as well. Some people will dig up the roots, wash it, dehydrate it, and they use it in tea. So the whole part of dandelion's edible. Yeah, it's only a
Wow.
weed if we call it a weed. You know, all plants are
Wow.
useful unless they're invasive. Then get rid of them.
And then what is invasive? I don't have that knowledge yet. But I think using
Ooh.
the plant will just take that weed label out of my head
Yeah.
completely.
Don't get me wrong. There's definitely some weeds, especially in this area, where like if you're experiencing them, like, you know, and I'd have to show you some photos specifically in order for you to know what they look like. But for folks listening, bindweed, creeping Charlie is very common in this area. Never plant anything like ivy. Ivy is very, very invasive. Some people use it for decorative items in their gardens, and it just takes over and destroys things. Technically, clover is invasive, but it's not necessarily harmful. Some people go in and they plant clover lawns, which, for the folks listening, everyone has an opinion on clover lawns. Clover is useful, but it is invasive. And what else would I tell you to
Mint.
avoid?
Mint was in a container, and I knew that.
Yes.
Mint becomes invasive.
Yeah. Unless you like, I mean, realistically, taking the time to dig it out is not a big deal as somebody who gardens all the time. But sometimes people just plant mint and then they don't take care of it, and then it can get out of hand very quick. So yeah, mint, definitely keep mint planted in a pot. Same with like lemon balm. Unless you're like tending to the lemon balm, it's the same idea as mint. Well, it'll start crawling on you. If you ever plant borage, which is like a medicinal type plant, it's like a fuzzy plant with these little cute purple flowers, great medicinal properties. However, if you plant borage, it will be in your garden forever because it self-seeds like crazy. I've never seen anything like it.
Lots of medicinal benefit from all
Yes,
the
but
plant.
just like beware. Other than that, you'll probably be fine. Just
Nice.
if you're ever in a garden center and you're filling your perennial beds, like, you can always do a quick Google search to see if something's invasive. Always stick to pollinator friendly plants and native plants where you can when it comes to ornamental gardens. But yeah.
Perennial vegetable is something that I'd like to focus on.
Mhm.
Like my mother told me that rosemary can actually stay in the garden. Like so
Depends
okay.
on the winter that we have. This winter, no. Last winter,
Okay.
probably. What you can do with rosemary is you can dig it out and bring it inside with you and leave it in the kitchen window, and it's not going to thrive inside, but it's not going to die. It might go dormant, and then you can take that back outside with you. Some people plant it in like a really big pot, and they have the pot on their patio, and then they bring that pot in and out as the seasons pass. That's common. Technically, all plants that we grow are perennials. It just depends on the growing zone that we're in that determines if it's a perennial or an annual. So, for example, in warmer climates, peppers are perennial. Some people actually bring peppers indoors. They let them go dormant and they store them in their basements, and then they bring them back out in the summer and plant them. So you technically can do peppers, but really the best perennials for this area, fruit trees are obviously amazing. Fruit bushes and, raspberries, blackberries, blueberries. And actually, we will have an episode coming out on fruit trees and fruit bushes in the coming weeks. I'm supposed to do the interview tonight. So we'll have some information coming out about that too, specifically for home gardeners to include in their backyards. Rhubarb's a really good one. Rhubarb's so easy. You plant it and you forget about it. Asparagus. What else? fig. We grow fig. It's a harder one. It's not a beginner friendly plant because you actually have to either dig it up and bring it inside, or you have to protect it over the winter because of our climate. I'm trying to think of what else. I said raspberry. I grow something called a tayberry. It's very vain of me because my name is Taylor and it's called a tayberry. It's a cross between a raspberry and a blackberry. They don't taste very good.
Are you
uh
going to keep growing them?
yeah, so I had actually okay, so when I met my partner, we were long distance for many years and he grew gardens. Like a lot of this I got from him. And I have a friend who lives in BC and she was like, "Oh, there's these berries called tayberries. They're very common down there. They have them in the grocery stores during the season." And I was like, "Tayberry? Like I need Alex to grow a tayberry for me." Like I thought it was cute. So he searched high and low for years and years. He managed to get seeds. He ordered seeds from a very sketchy website and tried germinating them. You can't germinate berry seeds, by the way. We looked for plants for years. We moved in together in 2020. We started a garden, and in 2021 we were at Stop and Go Nursery, which is if you are in West Brant and you're going out of Brantford on Colburn Street and you head up towards Burford, you go up this big hill, and this is absolutely useless for anyone who's not from this area, but you go up this big hill and there's this nursery on the right side of the road that actually looks like a convenience store. If you ever have a chance to go in, like, it's wonderful. And we went in and the nursery's like a maze, okay? The greenhouse is pretty big and it just goes on, but the aisles are tiny. You have to like walk sideways between the aisles, and there's plants growing and everything, and there's thorns snagging your clothes. And they have this section for really cheap fruit bushes. And we were going through the fruit bushes one day because every greenhouse we'd go into, we would check for the tayberries, and we found them. So this was in 2021, and he said, "It's my only tayberry plant. I'll sell it to you if I can take a cutting of it." And I was like, yeah. It was Christmas to me. Like, this was the highlight of my summer. So we go home, we plant it, and it really didn't do anything. Like, it grew pretty long vines, but we didn't get any fruit. 2022, early spring, we were in Stop and Go, and he had another one, and it was big. So we bought it, and we brought that home. We planted it. 2023, they grew really, really well, and they were actually taking over part of our gardens, but still no fruit. So this summer, we put in a like cattle panel into a big trellis arch. I'll put a picture in the show notes, and we kind of looped it up over the cattle panel so it didn't take over the garden. So instead it was on a big arch, and we got fruit this year. So
Oh.
I had been waiting years, like 7 years, for this fruit to taste it for the first time. I was so underwhelmed. It was way too sour. And they were like ripe, super ripe. And I think just because they're the hybrid between that blackberry and the raspberry, it picks up too much of the, acidy kind of bitterness of a blackberry and not enough sweetness of the raspberry. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Okay.
If you ever want some cuttings, let me know. We'll probably make some cuttings this year for equal ground, and you can try growing them. But I really was growing them for vanity purposes, and I thought it would be
Yeah.
something cute for me and Alex to work on together. And I was just so disappointed by the taste.
And it was a new plant, and it has your name in it. That's
Yeah.
funny, but it wasn't for the taste.
It wasn't for the taste. Yeah.
Okay.
Some really tasty brambles. This year we purchased gold raspberries from Creekview Acres, and I went to pastry school actually, and the last time I'd had a gold raspberry was we made a dessert with them in school, and so we're growing them this year. They're like a raspberry with extra sweetness. They're so delicious. The gold raspberries are very, very delicious, and there's another one
Nice.
too that I was just thinking of. But anyways,
Okay.
those are some of my recommendations for edible perennials. But yeah, don't underestimate things like asparagus, rhubarb. Yeah.
Do you prefer gold raspberries or red raspberries?
We grow both of them here, and I would just gold raspberries. The taste is gorgeous, and they ripen really, really fast, and they were really
Okay.
fruitful this year. And I loved going out, and we planted them behind our pond, so I have to walk over this little bridge on the pond. So I'd go out in the morning, and I'd go pick my gold raspberries, and we had raspberries past the frost this year, like into November. So it was like a nice treat to have throughout the fall season. So
Sold.
yeah, we didn't
Okay.
get them until like later in the season, so we'll see how they do in springtime.
Okay.
I really enjoyed them. Yeah.
Nice.
I think with the perennials, it took us a long time to plant like food perennials, and once we would see them, we would just plant them. And for a while, I wanted to avoid those things because I didn't think we were going to be staying at this house for so long, and I was going to feel bad about leaving them behind. But we've been here a lot longer than we anticipated, and these things have become a very special part of my garden. So, oh, another good one, kiwi. Fun fact, you can grow
No
kiwi
way.
here. Yeah, they're kiwi trees. Again, I'll put a photo in the show notes, but you can grow kiwi here.
Does it grow well?
Yep. We haven't
Wow.
had any issues. We almost had fruit this year, but I don't think they pollinated fully. And we also transplanted like the plants when they were about 3 years old, and then they were stressed out for a year, and then they were going to give us fruit finally this year, and they haven't yet. But I know before we transplanted them, they were doing really well.
What are easy fruit? Okay, you might cover this in your next episode.
I will.
What are some easy? Okay, what are the? I'm sold. I want some brambles. I want some trees. No, but in time.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
from my personal experience, raspberries are very easy. They do need a level of pruning, depending on the variety. But raspberries are easy if you have the space. The fall gold raspberries, apple trees are obviously very worth it. We planted some peach trees this year, so we'll see how those fare. I would say it's going to just depend on the level of care and maintenance that you want to give whatever it is that you're growing. So you can grow anything. But yeah, we'll be covering this in a very future episode, so you'll be able to listen to like actual experts talk about it.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah.
Okay.
Keeping up with the timing of everything and the amount of time it takes, which makes it rewarding. But that was surprising, and yeah, nature went quicker than I could keep up sometimes.
Yeah, that's typically how it goes. Nature knows what it's doing. There are some things that you can do, and you're going to know what I'm talking about, but there's some things that you can put into place where you don't need to maintain as much. Did you have a weed issue this year? Was it pretty good because the soil was fairly bare?
It was it was fine.
It was okay.
A few weeds, but I thought they made the garden look better. And they weren't that much. Yeah, they weren't that much. And I think it was probably that was my theory, because the soil was bare. Okay.
It might not continue like that year over year as the soil becomes more diverse, but hopefully you're starting with a clean slate and you can keep on top of some of these weeds. Pollinators do what they do best, and things like birds and squirrels are also pollinators in that they eat the seeds and then they poop them out. So it can be difficult to fully control that. But if you're not struggling with weeds so far, stay on top of it. Of course, you can use mulch for water retention if you were having an issue watering. And some plants do need pruning, and if you just know you don't have time to prune them, like tomatoes, for example, you can either trellis them differently and give them more support, or purchase varieties that you don't need to prune, for example. So if you know you're really short on time and that's a task you don't like that's where you would get a bit more specific about the varieties that you're going to grow. But yeah, stay on top of harvest, like, oh no, I have to go harvest food. Those are more the fun tasks, right?
They are. They are. And this was with the growing of tomatoes. We did cherry tomatoes and beefsteak tomatoes. We had like 8 different tomato varieties, as you know, because Equal Ground provided them.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a question of to snip off the flyaways.
Yeah.
What's the wording for that?
So that would be snip off the suckers. That's what they're called. Yeah.
So I did that to the best of my ability, but I still questioned it.
Yeah. So for folks listening, if we were to picture a tomato plant as a 90-degree angle where you have your main stalk going up and then you have your leaf, branch coming off, the suckers will come up between the main branches and the actual stem. They'll come up on an angle, and there are so many mixed opinions on whether you should snip the suckers or not. Hello, it's me. It's been a while since I did a little voice note like this. I have actually put an article, if you will, into the show notes of this episode, into the main show notes, actually. So if you're on Spotify or Apple Music, you can get it right from the show notes in there, about to sucker or to not sucker plants, because this is a very touchy subject and people have their strong opinions, and I'm going to give you my opinion in a second. Don't make it complicated, but maybe go through the article and see what might work for you. And I also recommend that you experiment, but I just wanted to provide another resource that wasn't me. Personally, I don't care. I don't have time.
Okay. Okay.
They've done lots of studies on whether it produces more fruit or not, and there's just always mixed results. And I really don't think there's an answer to this. I think this is going to be personal preference on whether you want to keep them snipped or not. Some old school gardeners, people who really know what they're talking about, snip them. And then other old school gardeners who really know what they're talking about, don't snip them. So it's really going to be personal preference. If you like to keep your plants manicured, if you have time to do it. It does allow for airflow, which is nice, especially in the face of diseases such as blight, which are these big black spots that show up on your plant and eventually kill it. If you're not experiencing that, then it's not really that big of an issue, but it's personal preference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it is
Perfect.
time consuming, right? To have to go out and do that on a regular basis, but you get to choose if you want to or not.
Okay. Sounds good. Yeah. We also created a little chicken wire fence and had one bunny really interested, but couldn't get in.
Good. I'm so glad to hear. Like I said,
There we go.
those
I know.
bunnies are looking for food, and if it's the only food source in the area, they'll find it.
Okay. Yeah. And I did feel a bit bad, but
Mm.
we didn't put the fence up until a tomato plant disappeared.
Oh.
But it didn't disappear. It just the main stem was up. They had the branches out, and the bunny ate all the branches. And then I
Oh,
was
yeah.
like, time to get a fence. So we
That's
went
a
to
bunny.
Canadian Tire. And then the tomato plant continued to grow
Yeah.
because they're so resilient.
So
Yeah. And the bunny got to enjoy like one tomato plant, which was good.
I mean, if you feel that bad, you could plant things like parsley and such in other areas of your yard and let them go ham.
Wow.
That could attract more of them, or
That's true.
it could detour them. They could be so focused on the parsley they don't care about your garden. But if you felt really bad, you could feed them in other ways, right?
That's true. But the fence was totally fine, and I'm sure they can get food in other ways. Yeah.
So as a beginner, you mentioned Google a few times. What types of resources did you use to try and navigate your first year of gardening?
Some YouTube channels with a lot of followers.
Ooh, you'll have to send them over after so I can put them in the show notes if you remember.
I know. And yeah, stop watching them around July probably.
Yeah.
So now they're in the back of my library.
Scroll.
Can't give anyone a shout out. So not useful. And then, this has also been starting to explore permaculture a bit in that world. And then my interest is also in this cottage garden thing.
Beautiful.
Got into that. But anyway, I'm glad everyone has their interests. I don't think I can put that much time into gardening just yet.
Absolutely. And I question for you, as you were navigating all these different resources, were you getting mixed signals?
Yes. So I think the sucker debate the tomatoes, whether to pluck the suckers on the tomatoes, that was up for debate. And I didn't know what to do. And then the carrot question that we talked about what to do to get longer carrots.
Yeah.
That was contested. So yeah. And everyone has different growing areas if you look online. So yeah, YouTube I think was my main source. And understanding growing areas, I still don't know exactly. I know, Taylor, you do mention that we're 5 something. We're
6B.
Oh wow.
We used to be
some learning
6A.
to do.
So
we used to be 6A. Okay.
Yeah, growing zones. I mean, I'm sure you know this. Folks listening, growing zones we have them in our show notes a lot. I'll put them in again. They are essentially groups of areas that have similar climates. So this could include the length of your warm season, the type of winter you experience. So North America is divided up into different growing zones, and your growing zones often dictate the types of plants you can grow based on whether they can tolerate a winter or not. Some gardeners will tell you that growing zones don't matter. It's actually your first and last frost dates that matter, but I don't deal with the frost dates. That's too much math for me. I'm a very trial and error gardener. Like, if something doesn't work, yeah, too bad. Okay, let's dive back in. Are there any skills that you're looking to improve on in the next garden season? Anything you want to tackle? I know you have mentioned kind of dabbling in a little bit of permaculture knowledge and a little cottage garden knowledge. Is there anything you are planning to tackle this season?
I'd like to understand or even do taking the seeds from marigolds, particularly because when I harvested marigolds, they just came out so easily.
Yeah.
And I think I was listening to this podcast to know that even happened.
Yeah.
I was like, I can reuse these. And then that learning on, okay, you take it off your plant and then you put it where?
You gotta dry
That would
it.
be my next question I need to
Yeah.
learn.
Yeah, that's a good one. So that would be seed saving. Sometimes we do seed
Okay.
saving like workshops. Maybe we can do a seed saving podcast one day. But yeah, that honestly is all just trial and error, and you really got to do it to know it. Like I can sit there and lecture you on it for an hour, but almost all plants seeds can be saved, whether it happens, you open up a pepper and you can pull those seeds out, or you have to like sacrifice the plant to get the seed. So the seed is the reproduction cycle, of course, of the plant itself, and it's just knowing when that seed's going to be produced. For things like zucchinis and cucumbers, you actually have to sacrifice the fruit in order to get the seed. The fruit has to get really big and pretty much inedible for the seed to develop. So my suggestion for that would be just practice, like you said, with the marigolds. And different seeds have to dry and others have to be like fermented before they can dry. So I'll send you over a seed saving resource, but my suggestion is to just like observe your plants, and you'll actually often see the seeds forming over time, and then you can do a quick Google search to see when they might be ready, and you can harvest them. So it's a lot of trial and error, but it's fun. The problem that I have with seed saving is like once you start, it's really hard to stop. And then you're surrounded by all these seeds in your house that you got to process in like January.
So you do seed saving?
Yes, I do. I'm trying to think of what I have in here. I told you I'm surrounded by seeds right now, and it includes all the seeds that I saved last year that we're packing up right now. So
Yeah.
favorites, honestly, marigold. Love marigold. Some other ones that are really fun to save, cilantro, if you grow cilantro. And cilantro bolts really quickly, so that's easy to grasp. Some things take longer, like lettuces and greens. You have to sacrifice the plant in order to get the seed, and it can take a couple
Mm.
months to develop. Tomatoes, you can save seeds from, but you have to ferment the seeds first. Peppers, you can save seeds from. Beans are really easy. You just let the bean
Okay.
dry on the vine, and then you can collect the pods.
I like easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. No
Beans are
fermenting
so
yet.
easy. Beans and
Okay.
marigolds are easy. Also, do you understand the process of bolting?
Nope.
So this is what the plant does. It will usually when it gets hot out, the plant goes, "Oh, it's time to reproduce." And in the case of lettuce, the lettuce will get really tall really quick, and then it tastes terrible. So that's how most greens go. They'll bolt, and then once that bolting process starts, it's no longer edible. It gets really gross, and that's when it'll start to produce seed. So if you start to see a plant bolt or go to seed, that's the other term. If you are willing to sacrifice the garden space, just leave it and watch it and observe it, and eventually there'll be seed that you can collect. Also, if you grow
Wow.
poppies, poppy seeds are so much fun to collect too. You like
Why?
let the little pod dry, and then it looks like a little rattle, and the seeds are inside. And you can hear them rattling around, and you can take the pods off and you dump it in a bowl, and then you have the seeds. So yeah, poppy's a lot of fun too.
Okay. That's great.
Okay, I have a couple questions for you about your personal garden, and we'll go through them pretty quick.
Okay.
What is one thing you dislike about gardening?
Not being able to keep up with how fast things are growing. Oh no, that wouldn't be it. That would be like, yeah. I think
That's a pretty good answer.
dislike when a plant doesn't grow.
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't like when a plant doesn't grow. Yeah.
Feels like a waste of time and space, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a learning
Yeah.
opportunity, though.
And it's also like, wow, what could I have done better? But
Yeah.
yeah,
That's all
learning opportunity.
all trial and error. Like nobody ever stops knowing, or like nobody ever stops learning how to garden. So that unfortunately will
Okay.
happen forever.
Okay.
What's the next one? What's your favorite vegetable to grow?
It would be tomatoes
What's
because
your-
they grow.
What's your favorite vegetable to eat?
I would say good potato.
I like a good potato too. I've got potatoes waiting for me right now for dinner.
Okay. Great.
What's a vegetable you don't like to eat?
I am not the biggest fan of eggplant. I think.
Yeah.
Like it can be cooked pretty well though. So that's not the best example. Olives.
Oh.
Yeah. But are we
That's
growing
a
olives
vegetable.
in Brantford?
Well, I mean, the question was a vegetable you don't like to eat, not like to grow. So
Right.
we are not
okay.
growing olives in Brantford, though. No, the answer is
Right.
no.
Okay. Right.
That's like a red zone.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I'm not a fan of olives. Yep.
Do you have any plants that you were gonna try for the first time this year growing in the garden?
Lettuce. like basic lettuce. I only did the Swiss chard in the leafy varieties.
Mhm.
So you're gonna get some lettuce
Some
and some
lettuce
other
in there.
greens going. Do
Very
love a good
easy.
arugula as well. Yeah.
I don't. It's too spicy for like radish. The word's not spicy, but it's like I don't know what the word is.
The
Zippy.
word zippy. Yeah, I think it's zippy.
Yeah, it's zippy.
Yeah. Yeah. I love
And
it.
I feel like we already touched on this one, but one thing that you really struggled with in the garden this year.
Yeah, I think it would be keeping up with how fast things were growing. Even like when we had to plant, we got the initial plants from you and they stayed in this container, which they were not happy in for a long time until it was like, oh, we need to create some weekend time to put these in the soil.
Mm-hmm.
And so even the start of that, right, was like get it in,
Mm-hmm.
and then it was snow on the ground when we finally like dug up everything.
Oh, yeah. And
Oh, is
honestly,
that normal? And I was like, this
yeah.
is too late.
No.
Yeah.
Garden cleanup. Not everyone's going to agree with me. This is all personal preference. Well, I judge you a little bit if you fully clean your gardens out because that provides a lot of overwintering space for pollinators and habitat. What I will do, because I have a landscape architect boyfriend, goodness me, there's
great.
dead plants in the garden. But what I'll do is I'll just snip them at the base and I'll leave the root system in the ground indefinitely unless they were diseased plants. What some people do, they don't touch their garden until like May. They let everything just die and
Wow.
stay there because realistically, that plant matter is just going to break down into nutrients. It's going to leave habitat for the pollinators. So if you don't have a picky spouse, you could honestly just leave everything in the garden. But this is entirely personal preference. Yeah.
Okay. We put mulch on it too. So took out
Nice.
everything, put mulch on it.
Yeah, that's good.
And because we had the mulch to actually put in the garden. And I was like, I don't know if I should put it in July.
Doesn't
So
matter.
then,
That
yeah,
works,
everything
though.
just seemed out of order, but it
Yeah.
really wasn't.
No,
And
it's
nature
fine.
takes care of everything.
It's people, yes. Everything, gardening sometimes is overcomplicated and nature takes care of itself. So if you don't have a picky spouse, just leave the plants in. If you do, just snip them at the base and leave the root system in there because it's going to provide better pathways for water access. The roots are going to decompose in the soil. It's going to leave home for, biodiversity. And as long as the plants weren't diseased, if they were diseased, then pull the entire root system out. Also, just a note for you, when you are growing sunflowers, don't plant them with your vegetables.
Okay.
Yeah.
They were right beside my tomatoes.
Yeah, so they release I don't actually know how to pronounce this. I was chatting with someone about this recently, but they release something called the allelopathic chemicals into the area. So they don't partner well with other plants. And maybe we've talked about companion planting. This is part of that. So sunflowers, put them in another part of the garden. It's just we just don't want the root systems to touch. That's all.
Okay.
So-
The tomatoes that were on the other side next to the marigolds did better. Didn't know why. Maybe it's because the other ones were with sunflowers.
Yep. All right, good stuff. So was there anything that you would like to add before we wrap up here?
Just that, yeah, Equal Ground really helped my garden journey, and you did as well, Taylor, when you were at the sites. So, yeah, so thanks so much, and yeah, I'm looking forward to the next growing season.
Good. I'm so glad. Thanks for coming and chatting with me. I'm so grateful. It was such a good
Yes.
conversation. I love this.
Yeah, me too. This was the highlight of my day, so thanks so much.
Good. Alrighty, Jillian, I'm so grateful that you sat down and talked with me. There was a few times where Jillian had hummed and hawed about coming on the podcast and, well, I'm just a beginner. Guess what? It's these conversations that I want to be having on the podcast. So if you're a beginner gardener, please come talk to me. I really, really want to chat with you. I love to yap if you can't tell. So just shoot me a message, podcast@egcgbrant.ca. I don't care where you live. I don't care what your gardening experience was. It's a lot of fun and it's just like being on a Zoom call. So it doesn't even feel like you're doing anything. Okay, I'm going to stop talking now. Let's just dive right into our credits here. Thank you again to the City of Brantford and the Brant Community Foundation for funding this podcast. Also, a big thank you to our board of directors for letting me run with this project, and welcome to the board, Tasha and Catherine, who are new additions to our 2025 board of directors. The Community Garden podcast is administered by Equal Ground Community Gardens, and you can view this episode's show notes at thecommunitygardenpodcast.ca. Podcast production and editing is by Matt Wilfred at Nuthatch Consulting, and you can get in touch with Matt at nuthatchconsulting@gmail.com. And also, our graphic design was done by Ben at All Day Breakfast, as well as one of our board members, Paulina. And thank you to our lovely podcast committee, Paulina, the same Paulina, Charlene, and Kat for all of your hard work. And please consider following, subscribing, rating, reviewing, whatever it is you can do on the platform that you're listening to, because it's going to help us reach more people. And you can follow Equal Ground on Facebook at Equal Ground Community Gardens. And you can also join our Facebook support group with the same name. And you can find us on Instagram at equal_ground. And you can learn more about our organization at www.egcgbrant.ca. Finally, again, if you would like to be on this podcast as a guest, you can email me, podcast@egcgbrant.ca, or you can visit our show notes page at thecommunitygardenpodcast.ca and click contact up on the top right. Okay, friends, I'll see you next week.